Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Modi Gambhir. Let's get started. Our top focus tonight is on the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia's latest warning says it will shoot down Tomahawk cruise missiles and bomb their launch sites if America decides to supply them to Ukraine. We're also decoding the battlefield developments with the border city of Belgorod once again in focus. We are telling you why that's significant. Also on the show for you tonight, telling you all about the companies powering India's defense export surge. And also focusing on a major NATO drill testing readiness against Russia as the tensions mount. All this and more coming up. The flames of the Russia-Ukraine war are burning dangerously close for Moscow and Kiev, blurring the front lines of this war, and the Russian border city of Belgorod is once again in focus. 3 people have died after a Ukrainian missile slammed into the Belgorod region, the second deadly strike on the area this week. And the local governor has said that the attack hit a settlement called Maslova Pristan, located around 16 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The missile struck a public building, partially destroying it. 2 men and a woman lost their lives. At least 10 others were injured. In the skies, Russia said they intercepted 53 Ukrainian drones overnight, claiming to have neutralized a wave of aerial threats targeting critical sites inside Russia. And the Russian president brushed off the growing number of Ukrainian strikes, describing them as ineffective and insisting that they will not alter the battlefield. Listen to this.
The enemy, despite stubborn attempts at resistance, is retreating along the entire front line. And against this backdrop, the Kyiv regime, eager to demonstrate some success to its Western sponsors, is attempting to strike deep into Russian territory at completely civilian targets. This won't help.
And even as Putin tries to play down Ukraine's reach, Moscow has expanded its own campaign against Ukrainian infrastructure. Russia has intensified attacks on Ukraine's railway network. Ukraine's national rail operator reporting that strikes on transport routes doubled in September as compared to August, crippling cargo and energy movement near the front lines. And Russia also launched a massive drone attack on Ukraine's Chernihiv region, while a wave of kamikaze drones struck the northern cities of Nizhyn and Priluki, leaving heavy destruction behind and causing power outages across several districts. Ukraine has said 12 Shahid drones targeted a freight train, halting rail traffic to Kiev and destroying the tracks. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, meanwhile, Russian forces attacked the Ukraine president's hometown with dozens of Shahid drones, injuring people and damaging infrastructure. The escalation coming as Kiev looks to the west for reinforcements. Ukraine is awaiting the delivery of the American-made Tomahawk missiles. Russia's deputy foreign minister has urged the United States to take what he called a sober and sensible approach to the supply of the missiles. The Russian deputy foreign minister also said the momentum towards reaching a peace deal has faded after the Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, suggesting that the momentum towards negotiation has all but disappeared. And the deputy foreign minister also claimed that supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine would not change the outcome of the war. Putin echoed that sentiment, with the Russian president stating that long-range weapons like the Tomahawk will not change the fight and only worsen relations between Moscow and Washington. And the head of the Russian Parliament's Defense Committee has warned that Russia will destroy the Tomahawk missiles and their launchers if the US gives them to Ukraine, adding that Russia will find a way to retaliate against Washington. That quote-unquote hurts. Now, experts also have said that even if Ukraine receives the missiles, operating them would be nearly impossible without American or British personnel. The Tomahawk system requires extensive pre-launch programming and advanced training, processes that could take Ukrainian forces at least a year to master. On the battlefield, Russia claims steady gains. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry has said its troops have captured one settlement each in Donetsk and Zaporizhia. While Putin has said that the Russian forces have taken nearly 5,000 square kilometers of territory across Ukraine this year, about 1% of the country's land area, and now control roughly 20% overall. And his comments directly contradicting US President Donald Trump's recent claim that Russia has, quote-unquote, virtually gained no land. As the war goes beyond the front lines, both sides locked in that cycle of attack and retaliation with no clear end in sight as of now. Shifting focus for now, as Israel marks the second anniversary of the deadly October 7 attacks. The region continues to remain on edge. It's caught between the horrors of the war and the fragile possibility of peace. In recent days, the talks in Egypt have intensified, with Qatar acting as a key mediator. Even as the negotiators seem to inch closer to an agreement, the overall landscape remains rather precarious. Both sides continue to grapple with deep-rooted distrust and the unresolved demands. Khalil al-Hayya, who is a senior Hamas official, has publicly emphasized on the need for real guarantees to ensure a lasting ceasefire as part of any deal for the release of the remaining hostages still in captivity in Gaza. Hamas, which has long resisted the full scope of peace efforts, has displayed a more optimistic outlook on the discussions. Another senior official stated that hostage lists have been exchanged and a prisoner swap could be on the horizon. The US-backed peace plan proposed by Donald Trump is at the center of these negotiations. Remember, the plan includes provisions for Gaza's international governance and the disarmament of Hamas, which is yet to be accepted. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed cautious optimism, framing the talks as focused on technicalities rather than fundamental shifts in policy as such. And while Trump's plan has garnered significant international backing, including from both Israel and key Arab states, its implementation has met resistance on multiple fronts. Hamas has made it clear that guarantees on the release of prisoners, as well as the return of bodies of key figures like Yahya and Mohammad Sinwar, must be part of any lasting peace agreement. However, Israel has rejected these demands, citing national security concerns and the desire to avoid further concessions to the group. Meanwhile, the Turkish president has put Israel in the dock in a way. He says that it was neither fair nor realistic to put the burden of achieving peace in Gaza solely on Hamas and Palestinians. He stated that Israel must stop its attacks in order for the peace efforts to succeed.
The Palestinian resistance group, Hamas, responded very positively to Mr. Trump's peace plan. Thus, it clearly demonstrated its will for peace. However, it is a fact that peace is not a single-winged bird. Placing the entire burden of peace on Hamas and the Palestinians is neither a fair, correct, nor realistic approach. Currently, the greatest obstacle before the path leading to peace is Israel's attacks. Despite Mr. Trump's clear calls, Israel continues its attacks, which undermine the positive atmosphere. If peace is truly desired, Israel's attacks must be stopped immediately.
And as those discussions continue, two major obstacles remain: Israel's military withdrawal from Gaza and the release of the prisoners. And Hamas, remember, is demanding a fixed timetable for the Israeli forces to pull out of Gaza, with specific details and not just vague plans. Hamas also seeking free movement within Gaza to collect hostages and bodies and access to the Egyptian border, which is not included in the initial phase of Donald Trump's plan. But Israel is reluctant to ease the pressure on what it views as a broken enemy. It fears that Hamas could regroup and reorganize if the withdrawal happens too quickly. Even if a deal is reached, political resistance remains a significant challenge. Prime Minister Netanyahu facing a potential backlash from the far-right ministers in his government, with some of his ministers, in fact, calling for the complete destruction of Hamas. Listen into this.
I only pray that our Prime Minister will allow a complete victory in Gaza as well as to destroy Hamas. With God's help, we will return the hostages and we will win a complete victory.
And while the talks of the ceasefire echo through the international chambers, the reality on the ground remains grim. In Gaza's Deir al-Balah, desperate families gathered in long and weary lines, not for shelter, but for a simple bowl of food. A makeshift soup kitchen has become their lifeline there. Now, the talks between Israel and Hamas are in a critical phase, with a momentum building towards a possible deal, but also fraught with complex challenges. And as Gaza hovers between the brutal realities of the war and the tenuous hope for peace, the outcome of these negotiations will have profound implications for the entire region. From Mumbai to Moscow, from the skies to the seas, India's defense industry is no longer just serving domestic needs, it is arming the world. And the Indian government's push to make India Atmanirbhar, or self-reliant, has proven to be of great benefit to India's defense sector. It has, in the truest sense, achieved self-reliance. Today, India's defense exports have hit record highs, surging 34 times over the past 11 years, from just 6.8 billion rupees in 2014 to 236.2 billion rupees in 2025. That's a 12% year-on-year jump. Thanks to the defense sector boom, India is transforming from an importer to an export power, as it has become increasingly sought after in the global arms market. And driving this are four key players, four Indian companies that must be credited for their contributions. They are a mix of private innovators and public sector giants, and each of them carving a niche for themselves in technology, missiles and defense systems. Let's break this down for you. First up is Astra Microwave Products. They are specialists in defense, aerospace and space electronics. Astra designs radar and tactical systems, plus space electronics components. While 86% of the revenue comes from domestic defense contracts, their exports already making up 10%. And Astra Designs now aiming to triple that. Next is Data Patterns. They are experts in defense and aerospace electronics, and they cover everything from radar systems to missile seekers, radars alone contributing 2/3 of their revenue. Exports now make up 10%, including NATO orders and East Asia contracts. Even with a small dip in quarterly revenue, their growth outlook remains strong, targeting 20 to 25% revenue growth over the next few years. And then there is Bharat Dynamics. It's riding the missile wave, known for the Akash surface-to-air missiles and anti-tank systems. It is the sole Indian producer for several missile types. Exports skyrocketed from 1.6 billion rupees in 2024 to 12.7 billion this year. Now making up over 1/3 of total sales, with partnerships and tech transfers on the horizon, Bharat Dynamics positioning itself as a global missile supplier. And finally, there's Zen Technologies. They are specialists in simulators and anti-drone systems. It is now expanding globally, in fact. Exports are expected to pick up in the second half of FY26, targeting markets in Africa, West Asia, Southeast Asia, even NATO countries. Their order book and advanced tech keeping them poised for the next phase of growth. So there you have it. These four giants, four Indian champions, not just defending the nation, but also putting Made in India on the global defense map. With policy support, cutting-edge R&D and rising global acceptance, India's defense exports are also set for a new high. And these companies are proving that when it comes to defense, India is no longer just a consumer, it is a global supplier. This week, NATO is flexing its military muscle in the North Sea as tensions between Europe and Russia escalate. The exercise coming after Russia allegedly tested the alliance's defenses on its eastern flank. In the North Sea, the French Navy frigate took center stage in a high-stakes exercise, hunting submarines with its cutting-edge Captus 4 sonar, known as the Yellowfish. And this operation is just one part of a massive NATO drill, bringing together thousands of troops, ships and aircraft across multiple seas to test readiness and coordination. The exercise brought together 13 nations and more than 10,000 sailors, soldiers, aviators. The frigate sailed the North Sea before moving into the Norwegian Sea via the Guyuk Gap, a strategic route often used by Russian naval forces. On board, the crew deployed the towed sonar system, Captus 4, designed to detect submarines. The sonar emits signals that bounce off the seabed and anything in the water, returning to the ship where trained operators can distinguish between marine life and potential threats.
We have screens, and echoes appear on these screens in the form of small green dots. Our operators are trained to detect whether it is a submarine or the seabed based on the shape of these green squares.
The helicopter is playing a critical role as well, extending the frigate's reach. They can quickly detect underwater contacts and deliver weapons over long distances, complementing the ship's capabilities. Torpedo launchers, anti-air missiles, advanced radars, making the frigate a versatile tool in NATO's arsenal. And above the water, fighter jets rode off the deck, flying in diamond formations to demonstrate the air coordination. The drills included simulated air attacks, amphibious landings, boarding operations, a clear display of the NATO's readiness and interoperability. And the exercise coming amid growing tensions, of course. Just a day before the Neptune strike, the Russian reconnaissance planes reportedly flew 3 times over German frigate at a very low altitude in the Baltic Sea on September 21. The German defense minister described the incident as unprofessional and uncooperative. The NATO exercise began the same day that a few hundred kilometers away, 3 or 4 large drones flew over the Copenhagen airport, disrupting the air traffic. NATO nations have time and again called these incidents as Russia's hybrid attacks against the NATO countries, a fear that Denmark's Prime Minister reiterated during the course of this exercise. And for France, the Neptune strike was a chance to showcase both its naval capabilities and also solidarity with allies. It carried out anti-submarine and anti-air operations while integrating with the US and other NATO forces in a demonstration of coordination as well as readiness in uncertain times. India has taken a big stand on Afghanistan, joining Russia, China and Pakistan in a rare diplomatic snub to the US. Specifically, US President Donald Trump and his push to take back the Bagram base in Afghanistan. And this move comes just days before the Afghan foreign minister, remember, makes that historic first visit to New Delhi, marking a big moment in India's engagement with the Taliban regime. While the joint statement issued by the participants of the Moscow format consultations did not explicitly mention the base, it made the stance crystal clear. The statement condemns what it calls attempts by countries to deploy their military infrastructure in Afghanistan and neighboring states, since this does not serve the interests of regional peace and stability. The Moscow format consultations brought together senior officials and special representatives from Afghanistan, India, Iran, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. Belarus also attended as a guest. For the first time, the Afghan delegation, led by the foreign minister, participated as a full member, a historic moment in itself, as it highlights Taliban's evolving diplomatic engagement. Since the group took control of Kabul in 2021, following America's chaotic withdrawal from the country. And while India and China have expressed opposition to the US reclaiming the base, their concerns are distinct and not directly linked to Pakistan's strategic interests. But for Pakistan, the primary issue here is the potential shift in the regional power balance in a way that could render its own Peshawar base less critical. And if the US re-establishes a foothold at Bagram, it may overshadow Peshawar's role and diminish its relevance in the broader regional security framework. And so, in a sense, Pakistan's stance is driven by its need to stay relevant. As for the US, the Bagram airfield, located in Afghanistan's Parwan province, has long been a cornerstone of the US military operations in the region. Established during the Soviet era and later expanded by the US, it became the largest American base in Afghanistan. And for Donald Trump, since he took office in January, and even before that, for that matter, he has repeatedly demanded the Bagram Air Base be returned to America, years after the 2020 agreement that paved the way for the American withdrawal from Kabul. At a press conference in September itself, Donald Trump said, and I'm quoting here, "We gave it to the Taliban for nothing. We want that base back," quote unquote. The Taliban, however, have remained firm. Their chief spokesman, in fact, has stated, I'm quoting here, "Afghans will never allow their land to be handed over to anyone under any circumstances." But as far as India is concerned, India's opposition to Trump's plan is notable. While New Delhi is yet to officially recognize the Taliban regime, it has continued humanitarian and development assistance in Afghanistan. And now, ahead of the foreign minister's visit, India is signaling its stance clearly, aligning with the regional partners to oppose the US bid and sending out a subtle message to both Washington and Islamabad. The airbase lies about 50 kilometers from Kabul. It is Afghanistan's largest airbase with two concrete runways spanning 3 and 3.6 kilometers. Its strategic location, as well as its capacity to host the large military planes, making it a crucial stronghold, historically vital to America's war on terror. The joint Moscow format statement also emphasized counter-terrorism cooperation, regional connectivity, and Afghanistan's sustainable development, highlighting initiatives in healthcare, agriculture, poverty alleviation, and disaster prevention. And with the Afghanistan foreign minister set to visit India later this week, cleared by the UN Security Council despite sanctions, Delhi's careful balancing act actually shows a larger diplomatic strategy. India is signaling that while it remains committed to humanitarian support and regional stability, it will not align with the US attempts to reassert military control in Afghanistan. And here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. We're getting you the latest on the UK Prime Minister's India visit. What has he said about the visa rules? We are decoding all the developments for you. Why has a big spy case in the UK collapsed? Why is this significant? How did things even reach this point? Answering all that for you in just a bit. And we're also focusing on how AI chatbots are offering spiritual guidance and what it means. All this and more coming up. The UK Prime Minister has made it clear that there will be no relaxation of visa rules for Indian nationals, and his focus remains solely on expanding businesses between New Delhi and London. And his announcement coming right at the start of his official visit to India. He landed in Mumbai on Wednesday for a two-day visit, leading a delegation of 125 representatives, including top CEOs, industry leaders, with the aim of promoting a new trade deal signed just months ago when Prime Minister Modi, remember, visited the UK. The UK Prime Minister dismissed any speculation about opening new visa routes for Indian professionals and reportedly said that expanding visa opportunities is not part of the plan. This position contrasts sharply with the British industry experts, in a way, who have warned that tight immigration policies are deepening the labour shortages across critical sectors in the UK. The British leader insisted that the focus of his trip remains on business partnerships, investments, job creation within the UK, not on changing the visa rules. Starmer said that visa-related issues had previously stalled progress on sealing a trade deal. And now that an agreement had been reached without any visa implications, he had no intention of reopening the matter when he meets Prime Minister Modi for talks on Thursday. In fact, his stance could perhaps reflect the growing pressure domestically, where anti-immigration sentiment is gaining ground, and the Reform UK party continues to climb in the opinion polls. On the first day of that trip, the UK Prime Minister met with representatives of British businesses operating in India to discuss opportunities for deeper trade and investment ties. The British Prime Minister also visited the studios of Russia Films in Mumbai, aiming to boost collaboration between the film industries of the two sides. Starmer also took part in a football showcase event in Mumbai. On the second day of his India visit, he will be meeting Prime Minister Modi before both leaders attend a fintech conference. The race to shape the future of American air power may be nearing its end as soon as this week. The Pentagon may name the company that will design and build the U.S. Navy's next-generation stealth fighter, a decision that carries the potential to define the balance of air dominance in the Indo-Pacific, specifically keeping China in mind. And according to a Reuters report, Boeing and Northrop Grumman are vying for the contract, which is expected to run into billions of dollars. The carrier-based fighter jet is expected to gradually replace the aging Super Hornet, which has been in service since the 1990s. The U.S. Defense Secretary reportedly cleared the program to move forward late last week, paving the way for an official announcement in the coming days. This long-awaited selection marking a major step for the U.S. Navy's air fleet modernization, which has faced repeated delays and strategic debate as well. Experts are warning that without timely development, the U.S. risks losing its technological edge at sea, especially as China accelerates its own fighter programs. Beijing is developing several advanced jets, including sixth-generation models. Analysts are saying China's rapid progress in both fifth and sixth-generation aircraft underscores the urgency for America to act now. It is expected to feature advanced stealth design, longer range, greater endurance, and integration with unmanned combat drones and carrier-based air defense systems. While key details of the program, including the cost, the quantity, production timelines, remain classified, projections suggest the first fighters could join service in the 2030s, with the Super Hornets continuing operations into the 2040s. US President Donald Trump and the Canadian leader Mark Carney sat down for a seemingly friendly and upbeat meeting at the White House. A lot of compliments, smiles, backslaps. Trump called Carney a world-class leader and a good man, while Carney in return showered Trump with praise for his supposed peacemaking and immigration overhauls. It was almost like a bromance brewing right before our eyes, which is a bit strange considering this rocky history between the two sides. In fact, Trump once even suggested that Canada could become the 51st state of America, remember. But then here's the thing, behind all the compliments and those handshakes, not much was actually decided upon. Trump, as usual, could not resist talking about the Democrats, immigration, and of course how Washington used to be a raging hellhole, in his words, before he took office. And when it comes to trade, Donald Trump said there is a natural conflict between the two countries over cars and steel. Basically, no progress as such was made. It was just the usual rhetoric in a way. There were some signs that things might move forward. Canada's trade minister, in fact, called the talks positive and substantive. But there was no major trade deal to announce. Trump did hint that he might be willing to ease upon the steel tariffs. which is big considering that Canada has been waiting for this for months now. But then the Canadian leader and his team are still in Washington hoping for a win on things like aluminium tariffs and trade terms. Again, no deal has been announced. Carney was clearly doing his best to keep things friendly. But the question still is, how will all this play back home in Canada? The Canadian public might not be so thrilled that their leader played nice in a way. And what impact will all of this really have, as he couldn't walk away with the concessions that his country was hoping for? Only time will tell.
We'll certainly be talking about Gaza. We're in very serious negotiations to, I guess you could say.
And Illinois has become a flashpoint in America's growing divide. 200 National Guard troops deployed on the streets of Chicago on orders from President Trump. Drone footage showed National Guard troops at Elwood U.S. Army Reserve Center near Chicago. The deployment comes after orders from the U.S. president, who has accused the state administration of not being able to control crime rates in Illinois, particularly in Chicago. Trump has also sharpened attack on top Democrats. He has called for the arrest of the Illinois governor and the Chicago mayor as well. Trump's accusations of unchecked crime in Chicago standing in stark contrast to the local reports that paint a quite different picture. And while Trump has described the city as a war zone, Chicago's officials are arguing that many protests, particularly over immigration policies, have remained largely peaceful, and that crime rates have actually declined in recent months. But this deployment coming amid the escalating rhetoric from Donald Trump, who threatened to invoke the 200-year-old Insurrection Act. However, when he was asked directly by the reporters at the White House, he refused to give out a straight answer. Listen to this.
Well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple. To have a great country, you can't have crime. And we don't have crime, but we have cities where there's tremendous crime. And Chicago's one of them. And if the governor can't straighten it out, we'll straighten it out.
But what exactly is the Insurrection Act all about? This law was passed in 1807. It gives the president the authority to deploy federal troops to suppress insurrections and enforce federal authority in states or cities that resist. Should he invoke it, National Guard units and military personnel would have the legal backing to act as law enforcement officers. And if the Insurrection Act is invoked, it would be the latest chapter in a growing divide between the federal power and state sovereignty. A division echoing back to the 1861 Civil War. The Civil War of 1861 was one of the darkest chapters in American history. It was triggered by southern states seceding from the Union and fueled by deep divisions over slavery and state rights. The conflict reshaped the nation forever. Over 700,000 lives were lost. But it ended with the abolition of slavery and a stronger federal union. And as the National Guard troops take their places in Chicago, the deployment is not just a local issue. It's a moment that will define the future of American democracy. It has kept the country on edge. Will the Insurrection Act be invoked? And what would that mean for the balance of power in America? The battle for the soul of America has entered a new, rather uncertain chapter. On the 7th of October, Prime Minister Modi completed 24 years in public office, stepping into the 25th year, marking a political journey that began in Gujarat in 2001, from bowing at the threshold of the parliament to installing the Sengal in the new Lok Sabha chamber. The Prime Minister took to X to express his gratitude. It was on October 7, 2001, that he took oath as the Chief Minister of Gujarat for the first time. Without ever having held elected office before, he would go on to govern it for over 12 years. And those years marked by industrial expansion, infrastructure growth, aggressive branding of the Gujarat model, became the foundation of his rise to national prominence. By 2014, his leap to New Delhi was decisive. His sweeping general election victory brought the BJP to power with a single-party majority, the first in 3 decades. And as Prime Minister, he launched ambitious programs like the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Digital India, Make in India, along with large-scale welfare and infrastructure drives. His tenure has seen the abrogation of Article 370, demonetization, the introduction of the goods and services tax, and a renewed focus on domestic manufacturing and foreign diplomacy. In 2014, on his first day entering Parliament as an MP from Varanasi, he bowed and touched his forehead to the steps, a gesture he called an act of humility before the temple of democracy. And nearly a decade later, in May 2023, the gesture found its echo during the inauguration of India's new parliament building, as he installed the sacred scepter with roots in Tamil tradition in the Lok Sabha chamber, originally presented to India's first Prime Minister in 1947. On Tuesday, Gujarat observed the day as the beginning of a week-long celebration of what the state officials call 24 years of continuous development leadership. Across districts, exhibitions and pledge drives were launched to highlight the administrative model. 24 years after that modest oath-taking, Prime Minister Modi stepping into the 25th year of public office. With his renewed insistence for Swadeshi and the resolve to bolster India on the global stage, a major spy case in the UK has collapsed, and the reasons behind this sparking political fire, raising serious questions. 2 men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, who were accused of spying for China, had all charges against them dropped last month. A move questioned by the ministers, the MPs, legal experts. In a rather unusual move, the UK's Director of Public Prosecutions has now stepped forward to explain why the prosecution could not continue. According to him, the Crown Prosecution Service made repeated attempts over many months to obtain evidence from the government that China should be officially classified as a national security threat. However, the witness statements provided did not meet the legal threshold necessary to proceed with the prosecution. Prime Minister Keir Starmer weighed in, saying that the government could only rely on assessments from the previous administration, which had referred to China as a challenge, but did not formally label it a threat to national security. Parkinson explained that at the time the charges were first brought in April 2024, there was sufficient evidence to prosecute, but a precedent set by a separate spying case earlier that year had raised the legal threshold required under the Official Secrets Act. Under this law, for espionage charges to stick, the country involved must have been considered a national security threat at the time of the alleged offences. The UK government has repeatedly expressed its frustration over the trial's collapse. Parkinson's detailed explanation coming after weeks of speculation as to why the prosecutors were unable to move forward. And the case has also drawn criticism from Conservative leader Kemi Pedanoch, who has claimed during her party conference speech that the Labour deliberately collapsed the trial because the Prime Minister wants to suck up to Beijing, quote unquote. Just to recap, the 2 spies were arrested in March 2023. The investigation, which involved counter-terror police, accused them of gathering and providing information prejudicial to the safety and interests of the state between December 2021 and February 2023. Under the UK's Official Secrets Act, espionage charges can only proceed if the information passed on could be useful to an enemy. The need to classify China as a national security threat emerged during an earlier espionage case involving 6 Bulgarian nationals who spied for Russia and were found guilty under the Official Secrets Act. The law states that espionage occurs if a person acts in a way prejudicial to the safety or interest of the state and shares information that could be useful directly or indirectly to an enemy. The former Attorney General has now called the collapse of the case a muddle, suggesting that the initial prosecution did not adequately focus on how China would be legally described in court. The UK government has denied any allegations that it withheld evidence or restricted witness testimony. Since last year's general election, the Labour government has signalled a desire to reset relations with China, and this includes visits by the Foreign Secretary and the UK's National Security Advisor aimed at enhancing dialogue and building a long-term partnership. In short, the collapse of this espionage trial has raised serious questions about the UK government's preparedness and the handling of sensitive national security cases. Is Emmanuel Macron staring at his last few days as the French president? Macron, who was once hailed as the master of the clocks, faces unprecedented challenges in the final stretch of his presidency. After 8 years in office, his political grip has weakened significantly, and with his government in turmoil, the question now is whether France's president can survive the mounting pressure or if his time in power is coming to an abrupt end. Macron's presidency has been marked by several major hurdles, but the current crisis may be the most severe. The resignation of his third prime minister in just 1 year seems to be emblematic of the growing instability there. The prime minister, who had only been in office for 26 days, announced his resignation to further compound the political chaos, and this instability is compounded by a fractured parliament. Following a snap parliamentary election in June 2024, Macron's centrist allies lost their majority, forcing him to seek uneasy alliances with other parties, and these alliances have faltered, and with no clear path forward. Macron is facing the possibility of dissolving parliament and calling for fresh elections. At the heart of his troubles lying France's worsening national debt, standing at a staggering 3.4 trillion euros, which is nearly 114% of the GDP. France has the third highest public debt in the Eurozone after Greece and Italy. The budget deficit is also projected to reach 5.4% of the GDP this year, signaling serious fiscal imbalances. And the need for bold fiscal reforms to address the deficit has placed immense pressure on the government. Macron's prime ministers, in fact, were ousted after attempting austerity measures to tackle the deficit. And the latest one, on the other hand, never even had the chance to present his own budget before resigning. Macron's own party leaders saying they no longer understand his decisions. Listen to this.
Understand the President of the Republic's decisions. First came the dissolution, and since then there have been decisions that suggest a determination to cling on to power.
With Macron's central position weakening, political parties are positioning themselves for what could be an inevitable shift in power. The far-right National Rally, led by Marine Le Pen, and the radical left have both called for Macron's resignation. These factions are vocal in their demands. They are eyeing potential elections that could reshape the French political landscape in their favor. But the hope to break the deadlock is thin in a way. The Socialist Party is asking Macron to appoint their prime minister. The far-right National Rally is calling for the dissolution of the National Assembly. Macron's own party leaders say they no longer understand his decisions, like we said. The alternative appointment of a new prime minister and trying to forge a compromise government would require sacrifices, like suspending the pension reforms. But this would come at a steep financial cost. And with France's debt already in crisis, there is limited appetite for further spending. As Macron enters the final 18 months of his presidency, his options are narrowing. Calls for his resignation are growing louder, but he remains resolute in his refusal to step down early. The question still is, can Macron survive this political storm? The master of the clocks, as he's been called, may soon find that even he cannot control the passage of time as his presidency teeters on the brink of collapse in a way. In a major move aimed at protecting children in this digital age, Denmark has announced that it plans to introduce a social media ban for children under the age of 15. The Prime Minister has said the cell phone and social media are robbing children of their childhood. And let's just zoom out here. As technology increasingly becomes a part of our daily lives, how are children being impacted? Take, for instance, what the Danish Prime Minister said. According to the leader, 60% of Danish boys between the ages of 11 and 19 prefer to stay home over spending time with friends. She said her government would propose a ban that also gives parents the option to approve social media use from age 13. Also talking about mobile phones becoming a part of children's lives so they can call home and communicate with their friends, but adding and saying that the reality is that a monster has been let loose, adding how never before have so many children and young people suffered from anxiety and depression. Remember, this is an issue of global concern, not limited to just one country. In fact, Australia has been a leader in global efforts to prevent internet harm among young people. In late 2024, its parliament adopted a ban on social media for users under 16. Although details on how the measure will be enforced are still pending. Platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube falling under the Australian ban's remit. In the month of June, Greece proposed setting an age of digital adulthood across the 27-country European Union, meaning that children would not be able to access social media without parental consent. And these are just some of the moves that have been made or are under consideration or have been talked about, given how mobile phones, online platforms, technology as such are increasingly influencing several aspects of our lives. It also becomes increasingly important to protect children and safeguard their childhood before it's too late. Artificial intelligence is stepping into the world of faith, and it is sparking quite a debate. From chatbots that preach as Jesus to virtual priests giving advice, religion is now going digital in ways we have never seen before. Apps powered by AI are offering spiritual comfort, moral guidance, even emotional support, promising to make faith more accessible. Take the app Text with Jesus as an example here. Thousands of users reportedly now pay to chat with digital versions of Jesus, Mary, Joseph, even the 12 apostles. The creators of the app saying the goal is a new way to explore religion through conversation. But not everyone sees this as holy innovation. There's been criticism. Many are calling it blasphemy. But despite the backlash, the app has positive reviews both on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store reportedly. And this trend of religion-specific apps, is not just limited to Christianity. Islam has an app. Hinduism has one as well, Buddhism as well. Even the Vatican is closely watching this trend. Reportedly, last year, late Pope Francis appointed the co-founder of Google DeepMind to serve in the Vatican's Scientific Academy. And in November 2023, in Texas, A pastor went a step further, letting an AI assistant deliver an entire sermon. So the question that still lingers is, can AI impact religion as it has impacted other parts of daily life? With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, world is one. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World